These soft, fluffy make-ahead dinner rolls are a lifesaver for Thanksgiving meal prep. You mix, shape, and par-bake them in advance, then simply finish baking on the big day for fresh, golden homemade rolls with almost no work. They stay soft, freeze beautifully, and bake up like fresh every time. Welcome y'all to Robin on the Farm. Today I'm going to show you how to make ahead rolls. These are homemade brown and serve rolls, and they are so handy to know how to make these kind of rolls when it's time for a big family meal or a big feast, kind of like Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter. These will save you a lot of stress and a lot of time in the kitchen on the day of the meal. So these are great to know how to make. So to make these rolls, we're going to make them. We're going to partially bake them in the oven or par bake them, and then they're going to be fine just to sit on your countertop for up to 3 days before your big meal. Or you can even put them in the freezer for up to 2 months, and then on the day of your meal, you just get them out, you bake them, or you really just brown them in the oven just for 10 minutes, and then you have these fantastic homemade rolls right in time for your meal. And you know that homemade rolls make any meal that much more special and memorable. These classic yeast rolls are so yummy. They're soft, they're fluffy, they're pillowy. Everyone is gonna love these rolls and want more than just one. So this recipe makes 24 rolls, which is 2 9x13 pans. This recipe only has 6 ingredients, so they're super simple to make. Let me just show you how to make them. I'm gonna start with 2 cups of lukewarm water. You want this to be about 100 to 110 degrees. That's perfect for your yeast. I'm gonna make these rolls using my Bosch Universal Plus mixer. Love this mixer. I highly recommend this mixer if you're in the market for one. Okay, after the water, now we want 4 tablespoons of melted butter. I just melted this butter on the stovetop in my little cast iron melting pot. So 4 tablespoons of melted butter. Mine is salted butter, but you can also use unsalted butter just fine. I always use what's on sale, and I found that butter for $1 a pound. So that was a good deal. After my butter, now I'm gonna add the sugar. I'm gonna use 2/3 of a cup of white sugar. Now, this is the holidays. This makes 24 rolls, and the sugar makes these so good. But if you want to, you can definitely reduce your sugar down as far as maybe 1/4 of a cup of sugar. You can also use 1/4 of a cup of honey if you'd rather do that. But this gives it lots of flavor, and these are really good rolls. Now it's time to add the yeast. This is my Saf Instinct yeast, and I'm gonna add 2½ teaspoons of this yeast. Now you can also use 2½ teaspoons of active dry yeast if you'd rather do that. I love to buy my yeast in bulk like this. I store it in the freezer and I get it out right in time to make bread, and then I use it and I put it back in the freezer and it lasts forever like this. So if you're gonna be doing a lot of baking, like I really think you should, then get your yeast in bulk like this because it's way cheaper than buying those little packets or those little jars that you see at the grocery store. So I'm gonna use 2½ teaspoons. I'm gonna put it right in there over my water and my butter and my sugar. Now it's time to add the flour. I'm going to use bread flour today, but you can also use all-purpose flour in this recipe. Now, I'm going to use 5½ cups. I'm going to start with 5½ cups, and I might have to add a little bit more. I might have to go up to 6½ cups. Really, it depends on your climate, the time of year, the weather outside. So many things depend on how much flour you need. You wouldn't think that it would make that big of a difference, but it really does. So I suggest starting with 5½ cups. And as it gets mixing and kneading, you can look at it and see if it needs a little bit more. I'll show you exactly what your dough should look like when we get to that part. So I'm gonna add 5½ cups. I buy my flour in bulk from Missouri Standard. I get it in big 25-pound bags, and then I like to keep it in these big 5-gallon buckets with these gamma lids on top. It keeps it nice and fresh in my pantry. So that's what I suggest doing. That's what I do, that's what I recommend. Okay, 5½ cups right on in there. And our very last ingredient already is some salt. We want 1½ teaspoons of salt. Now you can use any kind of salt that you have. You can use the pink Himalayan sea salt, you can use white table salt. I really love this Redmond's Real Salt. This is what I use in all of my baking, and I really like it. This is a North American ancient fine sea salt, and it's mined out of Utah. It's a really pretty pink color. So whatever you do, don't measure it over your bowl in case you over pour your salt. You'll ruin your recipe that way. So always pour it over something else. So 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Now, if you want to, you can also reduce the salt a little bit. The salt is going to give it a lot of flavor, but if you need to, you can reduce this down to a teaspoon or even 3/4 of a teaspoon. I'm using 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Those are already all of our ingredients. So it's time to get this mixing. So I'm going to turn this on to speed 1, and I'm going to let it mix up just for about a minute, and then I'm going to check on my dough. If I need to add a little bit more flour or water, that's the time to do it. I'll show you exactly what it should look like. You can see that my dough is sticking to the middle of my mixer. That means it's too wet. So I'm going to add about 1/2 cup more flour. Give it a minute to mix up, and if it needs a little bit more, I can add more then. But you're looking for this to come into a nice smooth ball of dough. You see how my dough has pulled away from the sides and from the middle, and it's a nice ball of dough now. This is what you want your ball of dough to look like for your rolls. This looks perfect. Okay, I've let my dough knead for exactly 8 minutes. Now, normally I would just leave it in the bowl and let it start to rise, but today I'm going to get it out so that we can check out this dough together. Oh, yep, I can already tell this is really nice dough. It's tacky, so it kind of sticks to my hands, but it doesn't stick so much that it's stuck to my hands and making a big mess. I'm going to be able to shape this into rolls, which is definitely the goal. Now, if yours feels too dry, then your rolls are going to be too dry. So you definitely want it kind of like this. Now, this is pliable, it's stretchy, the gluten's really well developed. So this lets me know that we're going to get really good, soft and fluffy, delicious rolls. Okay, now you can put this in a different bowl if you want to let it rise. I'm just going to stick it back in the mixer. Now, I want to let this rise for about 45 minutes to a little bit more than an hour. You want your dough to expand. Not necessarily double in size, but expand. So this totally depends on the temperature of your home, your elevation. So it really could take up to an hour and a half, or you could let yours go that long if you're a little bit busy. But I'm gonna let this rise for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then it's gonna be time to shape this into rolls. You're gonna wanna cover your dough so that it doesn't dry out. You can cover it with a warm, wet tea towel. I'm just gonna put the lid on my Bosch. And I will show this to you in about 45 minutes to an hour when it's time to shape these into rolls. All right, I've let my dough rise for about 45 minutes. You can see that it's expanded. It looks great. Now I'm just gonna turn it out from this mixing bowl. Now from here, I wanna punch down my dough. So I'm just gonna press it out. You wanna get all those air bubbles out of it. And just press it out really well. Now this recipe makes 24 rolls. So I have 2 9x13 baking dishes right here. Now, if you watch my channel, you know that I love my cast iron, and normally I would make this in a 9x13 cast iron baking dish, but I only have one, so note to self, I need to get another one, and I have something baking in the oven in it already. So it kind of pains me, but I'm gonna use these 2 glass 9x13 baking dishes. Now you can use a cookie sheet or any kind of baking dish, but I do like something with the sides, because as these rise, I'm gonna put some plastic over them so that they don't dry out. So that's something to keep in mind when you're trying to decide which kind of baking dish you're gonna use. Now I'm gonna just cut this dough in half. I'm gonna press this out a little bit better. And I'm gonna divide this into 12 rolls. You can get out your scale if you want to and make these all perfectly even, but I don't care if I have some that are a little bit bigger than others. I'm just gonna take one little piece of this dough, and I like to just kind of fold it over, and let it all meet at the bottom, pinch it together at the bottom, and then it gives you this really nice, smooth, rounded top. So you'll get a really pretty little roll like that. However you want to shape your roll is fine, but you definitely want it to be nice and smooth. If it's all jagged, they're not going to be pretty rolls. So try to get a nice smooth top. So I'm just going to do this 24 times. I have my baking dish greased up. I just rubbed some butter in the bottom of it, so make sure that you grease up whatever kind of baking dish you're using. Now, as you're shaping your rolls, you just think to yourself how proud you are that you are making these ahead of time so that you don't have to do this on Thanksgiving Day when you have a million other things going on and lots of people in your home. I definitely like to make these ahead of time. And it's so convenient just to have them on the counter, throw them in the oven, and have really good, yummy, soft rolls. Or I love to keep these in the freezer, just get them out when I need them, and they're ready in just about 10 minutes. No hassle, no fuss. And these are absolutely delicious. Everyone's going to be asking for your recipe for these. I like using this bench scrape tool. This is a great tool for cutting your dough. Every baker needs one of these. Now that I have all 24 of these rolls shaped, I'm covering them up with some plastic wrap just so that they don't dry out while they're rising, because if they dry out, they are just not going to turn out very well at all. So I'm going to let these rise on my countertop for about 45 minutes. And then it's going to be time to par bake them. Now, par bake means partially bake, and we are going to bake them at a really low temperature just until they're set inside, but not brown on top at all. And then it'll be time for you just to leave them on your countertop or put them in the freezer to finish baking and browning at a different time. So I will show these to you when they're ready to go into the oven. I've let these rolls rise for 45 minutes. Now it's time to put them into the oven. Don't forget to take the plastic wrap off of your rolls before you put them into the oven, or you're gonna have a mess. I'm gonna let these par bake at 275 degrees for 30 minutes. We want the inside to set, but we don't want any browning on top. That's gonna happen on the day of our meal. I let these rolls par bake for 30 minutes at 275 degrees. Now, if you want to be sure these are properly done and you have a food thermometer, you want these to register at 190 degrees. Mine went over that, so I know that they're done. Now notice how light they are. There's hardly any browning. This is exactly what you want them to look like when you pull them out of the oven from par baking. I'm going to let these rolls sit in these 9x13 dishes for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to transfer them over to a wire rack to completely cool. If I'm going to use these within 2 or 3 days, then I store mine in a beeswax bread bag on the countertop. But if it's going to be longer than that, then I store them in the freezer and I get them out right in time to bake them. I've let this batch sit on the countertop in a beeswax bag for 2 days, and now I'm going to show you how I make them. I have my beloved 9x13 cast iron baking dish, and I oiled it up with some coconut oil. Now, I have these rolls that have been sitting on the countertop, and I'm just going to arrange 12 of them in this 9x13. To bake these, I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees, and I'm going to let these bake for about 10 minutes. Let them go however long it takes for them to get nice and golden, however you like them. Now, if you froze your rolls and you thawed them, you're going to bake these for the exact same amount of time. But if you froze them and they're still frozen, then you're going to bake them at 425 degrees for about 8 to 12 minutes. Just watch them closely. Our homemade make-ahead brown and serve rolls are ready. Look how good these look. They're a beautiful golden color, and they are nice and light and soft and fluffy and oh so good. Now, something you need to do when they come out of the oven is brush them with some melted butter. This will just take them up a notch and make them even better, even more special for a special meal. Homemade dinner rolls are a must for a special meal, but these rolls will make any meal special. And I hope that these make-ahead brown and serve rolls help you have a little bit less stress when you're baking for a big occasion. I'm going to leave the printable recipe for these homemade make-ahead brown and serve rolls down in the description and on my website, robinonthefarm.com. I'll also leave you this recipe in grams. These are our handmade beeswax bread bags that I store all of my breads and rolls and all of my baked goods in. I was going to show you how I stored my leftover rolls in these beeswax bread bags, but look, we ate the entire dozen. They were delicious. But you can find the beeswax bread bags on my website, robinonthefarm.com.
Robin's in the kitchen, dough beneath her hands, wheat from the fields and eggs from her land. Sunlight through the window, a warm golden glow. She's working hard to make that dough.